Hello, welcome back to So Let's Talk About It. I'm Kayla, the owner of Search Fabric Shop, and this is just a weekly podcast where I share a little bit about what I've been sewing, what I'm working on, and I answer some of your questions. So I'll jump right into what I'm wearing. This is a hand knitted sweater. I made it about a year and a half ago. It is Caitlin Hunter's Halo sweater. It's a really cute little V-neck situation. I'm wearing it over a chalk and notch test tee just for comfort, and I have it paired with my new boucle Ayla pants. This is a pattern from True Bias. We just released this fabric on Tuesday and I am obsessed with this fabric. I want to make more pairs in various colorways of this fabric because it's just so unique, so eye-catching, and I love to wear solids. I'm not a huge prints person, so this is like the perfect in between solids versus a fun, funky print feel. So that's what I'm wearing. I accomplished quite a bit this past week. I feel like this podcast is keeping me motivated and on task, and I got a lot done. The first thing I sewed up was that Jessie tee. This is the True Bias Jessie tee, and I had it cut out with our Selkirk cable jacquard sweater knit. I love how it turned out. Cute little boxy number with a pretty cabling going on. So it'll be a fancy t-shirt to wear under a blazer or a denim jacket, something along those lines. I used our Vayroy rib for the collar, and that worked out really beautifully. I always top stitch neck bands because it just helps that ribbing stay flat and that seam stay flat through washing and wearing. So great tip if you are having problems with your neck bands laying flat. Next thing I sewed up was a Sew Liberated bedrock tank in our linen knit. This is a dead stock fabric that we brought in last summer, and we have very few colors left of it, and I'm pretty sure the black is gone. Maybe there's a little bit left. I'll just link the collection below if you're curious about what we have. But I cut this out at the end of summer, and I was just waiting for black serger thread to be in my sewing machine, and I actually put it in just so I could finish this. So I figure I'll probably wear this for workouts, and as a layering piece under sweaters and tops and things like that through these colder months. And the last thing I completed was this Labor of Love Rue quilt coat. This is from Spaghetti Western Patterns. It's a beautiful coat design, and the fabric I got was from my friend Bethany at Fluid Plus Drape, and I used a really fun pop of color. It's like this chartreuse yellowy color, very vibrant, and I feel like it just ties this in all together. And then in the shop we had these really beautiful lotus buttons, and it's not a perfect match to this contrast, but it works really well and complements it, I feel. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. I did have a few difficulties. One is sewing the buttonholes where the pocket was, because I was sewing them, under my foot with the pocket in the back. The thickness of the pocket and the body just caused some trouble feeding it back and forth. So I did the best I could, went back, just did some extra zigzags over that raw edge after I cut it open, and called it good. One was the binding on the pocket. I tried to do it all in one sweep, all the way around this curved and straight edge pocket, and realized that wasn't gonna fly. So I just did the straight edge first and then went around and bound the outer edge of that pocket. I'm not totally happy with how um, the edges at the corners turned out, but I don't think anybody will notice from a distance. Ooh, I had a pin in here still, and I wore it out the other day. The other thing I had a little trouble with was I wanted to add just the collar. I didn't want a contrasting collar piece. But the one thing I didn't really think through when I was preparing this piece was that the collar has an underlining, so that way you can top stitch it into um, the neck opening really cleanly. So I wasn't able to use this piece. I don't know exactly what I would have had to have done differently to make this work, but just something to keep in mind of if you are thinking, oh, I can just bind the edge of a collar piece and plop it on there. Not quite that simple. Overall, it turned out really beautiful. I'm so happy with it. And I added one of my own little signature tags in here and a racy Kylie and the Machine tag too from her Sweary Sewist collections. The one project I have going is the Daughter Judy Wren sweatshirt. I'm using our quilted cabled knit. This is currently on clearance. We've just had it for several years in these really fun bright colors, but people aren't really going for them. So we're trying to just move them out, clear them out of the shop so we can make space for new and more exciting fabrics. But I thought I like yellow. It's been a color obsession for me for the past couple years, so I thought I would just sew up the wren and give this new design a try on. I figure it'll also go really well with the little pop of yellow in this jacket and be great for layering. Okay, let's jump into some questions. First question, I like to sew using knit stretch fabrics, but after creating garments, often the fabric pills no matter how gently I launder it. How do I identify knit fabrics that won't pill? Okay, I'm not sure how many different garments you've made or what types of fabrics you've been using, but I will say that laundering is definitely at the top of my list for advice when people are having trouble with fabrics pilling or garments not wearing well in the long run. I always suggest washing with cold water. This preserves color, this preserves the fibers, especially if you have like a rayon. They're a little bit weaker with heat than with cold water. And when they are wet, they are especially more delicate. And if you're using rayons, definitely use cold water. Consider maybe air drying instead of tumble drying, or tumble dry on low. Another thing is friction in the washer. If you're washing them with towels or jeans, anything hard and abrasive is going to just brush that surface and cause premature pilling. So I would definitely revisit your wash routine, but if that is all checking out and no red flags are popping up there, it might be the fibers that you're gravitating to. Honestly, rayon is one of my favorite fabrics, but it is more prone to pilling. It's a soft, drapey fabric and it has higher stretch. And when it gets wet, it is especially susceptible to pilling, and it can't handle much abrasion when it's wet. So I always put like my rayon t-shirts in a gentle washing bag and lay them out to dry. Would not recommend hang drying because rayon can stretch when it's wet. Generally, knit fabrics with higher cotton content aren't going to be as prone to pilling, so maybe pick fabrics that have some cotton content. Poly adds a little bit of strength. There are sweater shavers, fabric shavers that you can use to clean up those surface pills, and that might help you extend the life of the garments you've already created. I hope that helps a little bit and gives you a little direction of what steps to take and maybe where to kind of pinpoint where fabric choice or otherwise are maybe going awry. And I hope you can save the garments that you've already created, because I know how much time and effort it takes to make each garment, and we want them to last as long as possible. Okay, next question. I want to give sewing knits another try. I have always struggled with choosing fabric for patterns to create the fit I would like. I am going to give the True Bias Jessie Tee another try and would like to hear about some fabric options for the pattern that would preserve the shape of the top, not drape too much, or cling. What fabric would you suggest I try? I've made a couple boxier fitting tops in a lighter knit fabric that actually works really, really well for the Jessie Tee. My absolute favorite is our organic cotton, hemp, and yak jersey. It is a lighter weight knit, but that cotton adds a little bit of structure to the fabric and doesn't create a garment that clings at all. So that would be amongst the top of my recommendations. Then there is also 100% cotton jerseys that we brought in last fall, I think maybe. They're dead stock fabric, so once some of the colors start selling out, we won't have them anymore. We won't be able to reorder them, but that is another wonderful option. I'll add some pictures of a few that I've made too, so you can see how the fabrics drape as a Jessie Tee. Keep in mind, I'm making the cropped view, so if you want a longer view, it's going to be a little bit longer and a little bit, you know, more fabric pooling at your hip. But those are probably my top two recommendations. Steer clear of rayons for this, because that's going to create that more clingy, more drapey silhouette that it doesn't sound like you're a fan of. Oh, another fabric you could potentially use is 100% linen knit. I feel like it is rather drapey, but it isn't a clingy kind of drape. It hangs straight down and kind of just moves more fluidly, but doesn't cling. So that's going to be another good option to consider as well. All right, next question. I've been sewing with a lot of thick knit fabrics lately, and I am having a hard time sewing over seams on the serger. Is there some trick I should be aware of, or is it time to retire my machine? I don't think it's necessarily time to retire your machine, but there are some things you can do to help make the process a little bit easier. Before I upgraded my serger, my old one wouldn't go over seams really smoothly, and I would kind of have to hand crank, push the fabric through very slowly, and it was kind of a tedious process, but eventually you get through that seam and can continue on. Another thing that I have found is that if you are not cutting off any of the seam allowance, if you're butting your fabric edge with the knife and cutting off just maybe a sliver or just like little frays that might be extended past that knife, it's going to go through a lot easier. My trouble seemed to come in when it was trying to cut and feed through at the same time. So that might be something to consider. Like, I feel like the bulkier spots are going to be cuffs and waistbands and neckbands and things like that if you're using like a fleece as both the body and the sleeve cuff. So I would try that. Another thing you can try using is a hump jumper. If you're having problem with like the back of the foot kind of sloping like this, if you just set this on the back edge of that presser foot, it's going to lift it up just a little bit, so that way the foot is more level and it'll help feed it through a little bit easier. So that's just a hump jumper. I'll link it below for you. Another thing you can do is, if it is a greater seam allowance and you can't just butt the raw edge up to the knife, you can sew it on your domestic machine first, your normal seam allowance, like 1/2 inch if that's what the pattern calls for, and then go over to the serger and clean that raw edge. Another thing, maybe you could also just skip those bulkier seams and do a zigzag stitch on your domestic machine. I think there's some ways to get around it if upgrading your machine or retiring your old one isn't really an option. Um, so yeah, I hope that helps. All right, that was all the questions for today. If there's anything you want answered next week, just drop it in that Google form below. I'll link that again. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful weekend sewing and creating beautiful things. I'll see you next week.